Hey guys, it's Christian McCaffrey, pro running back. I'm partnering with Abercrombie this season to tell you about their viral denim. All you need to know is denim should fit like this. Abercrombie's athletic fit is a game changer. They're designed for guys with an athlete's build like mine. Just enough room and the perfect stretch. When a jean fits that well, I'm wearing it on repeat. Shop Abercrombie Denim in the app, online, and in store.
Welcome to the Superhero Leadership Podcast, hosted by former CEO of Marvel Entertainment, Peter Cuneo. Listen as he explores outstanding leadership through the lens of successful superhero leaders. Here's your host, Peter Cuneo.
My guest today is someone whose leadership story breaks every mold and remakes it for the better. Patrice Gordon is a globally recognized, trusted executive coach, a former airline finance leader, a best-selling author, and the woman behind a movement that's reshaping how power flows in organizations. The movement is reverse mentoring. With career stops at British Airways, the Royal Mail, and Virgin Atlantic, where she served as director of commercial strategy, Patrice now leads her own company, M&Air, helping organizations embed inclusive leadership at every level. She's given a TED Talk and appeared on CBS Mornings. But today, she's here with us. Well, welcome, Patrice, very much. We're very happy to have you here on Superhero Leadership. You are a first in many ways. First, you are the youngest of all of our interviews, so you must be very special. I think another thing that makes you different from the rest of our interviews in a very positive way is that you are a proponent of something that many of us have not heard about, called reverse mentorship. So, of course, I, as the old guy in the room, are familiar with mentors and mentorship. And I've been very blessed in my career to have 4 or 5 great people come along at different times to help me through, if you will, and support me and suggest things to me and goals for me that I didn't even consider for myself. In many cases, those goals I thought were beyond me, actually. Yeah. I'm not a person lacking confidence, but these were just very big leaps. Yeah. And because of the people saying, you got to try this, I did, and they all worked out.
Wow.
So in a way, I didn't know, I guess you might say, how good I was, at least for certain things. And so mentorship's been very important to me, and I've tried to do that as well for others. Reverse mentorship is a new concept for me. I'm a little embarrassed because, frankly, it makes a lot of sense for me now that I'm learning. We usually start, though, asking our guests about growing up. One of the things that we've noticed about good leaders, effective leaders, is some very interesting things about their young life.
Yeah.
What was growing up like for Patrice?
Of course. And first of all, I'm so glad you're here in person. I'm glad you're here in London. I'm glad the weather's held out for you. And I'm just delighted that you're so curious about this, because that's, for me, where it all really starts from, with curiosity. Younger Patrice, I was born in Jamaica. I moved to the UK when I was 3. I pretty much grew up with my mother. And the most important thing for me that I can say is I grew up with a lot of love from my family and specifically from my mother. So I'm the first to go to university and the first to be an accountant. And I didn't have anyone in our family circle that had these professions or had a profession point blank. So my mum is an EA. She always has been, a very good one. My dad was an engineer from Jamaica, a mechanic, and he came over and now he's a social worker. But for me, I didn't know what was possible until I really started to study. And when I studied, you need to know this about, I'm a Libra. I love structure and I love flow. I love having things in order, but I also love the creativity side. So for me, accounting provided structure. It provided the knowledge that I knew where I was going to move on to in my career. And for me, then it came down to the people. So I chose finance because I was very good at it and I like things that I'm good at. I have a very high need for achievement. So I follow the McLennan needs and I have a high need for achievement. And that wasn't because I was kind of reprimanded in any way when I didn't achieve. But for me, the personal fact that I can set a goal and I can achieve it. Numbers talk to me in that way. And as I started to study more, I realized the more you study, the better your grades get and the more kind of, praise that you get, I guess. But for me, it was what career is going to help me to achieve like my best self, and finance provides that structure, and I knew I could move on from that. When we get to later in my career, I chose PwC. So I studied there, passed all my exams first time, but then I was doing audit. And so for those of you who know what audit is, it's not necessarily the most interesting part of finance, not necessarily matched with my bubbly personality. But for me, I knew that sometimes you need to do like the rough things. You need to do the things that perhaps you don't enjoy so much so that you can be more credible in your approach and people can take you a little bit more seriously, in my viewpoint and opinion. And what I did from there is I joined an organization called British Airways, and I joined in the group reporting department in finance and looking at revenue specifically. So I did the hard stuff with audit, and then I moved into an industry that I really enjoyed. And I think in whatever we do, if we have a craft that we've honed and we can do it in a company that we really enjoy, that for me is the secret sauce. That's the key. And then I went on to Royal Mail to become finance director there. So that was a big promotion for me. And for me, I like to throw myself, I like to jump and I like to see what I can achieve. And I did 5 roles in 6 years at British Airways. I was Patrice will fix it. I moved into from group reporting, I helped to set up IAG. So I was part of the group that merged Iberia and British Airways. I then moved into the marketing team for finance and led the marketing team when we did the 2012 Olympics. And then I did a little stint in New York, coming back to lead the Middle East, Asia and Pacific finance team. So lots of different teams that needed kind of hands holding, but also structure. And then my thing is I like to come in, set up the structure, leave them for success. So legacy is important to me, and then move on to something else. And I think that's how I built such a good career, to be able to move on so quickly and then join in Royal Mail and move into be a finance director.
Well, I want to go back to when you were young for a second, okay? You were moved into what I call an alien environment, meaning it was new. It was different, not necessarily negative, although there may be some negatives as well. But your parents took that leap, that risk for various reasons. And I'm sure that was obvious to you. But what was it that said to you, I can do this, I can get ahead, I can accomplish all of these things? Because unfortunately, there are many other people who move around, whether it's between countries or even within a country, move to a different environment completely, and they don't do well. What was it about you or your parents? How did they
navigate that?
Instill in you, no, I can go do this? Were they whispering in your ear every day? Patrice, you can be whatever you want.
You know what was really interesting is I have a mother who is just so filled with so much love that she was like, you can do whatever you want as long as you're happy. So it wasn't, I think you should be X, Y, and Z. I think you should be this profession. It was do what makes you happy. And for me, stability made me happy. So, you know, growing up, it was stable, but it could have been more stable. And I kind of looked at other people around me. I went to an all-girls Catholic school in the suburbs. So there you were kind of exposed to different ways of living, right? And different things that could be possible. And for me, the education was the unlock, was the key, because I could see that other students who were quite intelligent were getting lots more attention, and they were talking about things I had no idea about, or I couldn't see a path for myself. But I did know that if I applied myself, I would get more attention from the teachers, and then more opportunities would open up for me. My first experience of leadership was when I was 17, and I was actually a weekend supervisor in a department store in Croydon. And for me, that also showed me like hard work equals results. So along the way, since probably 12, where I have been able to dedicate myself and work really hard, I could see the outcome. And I think with my high need for achievement, that's kind of the training that I've done. And still to this day, it's like hard work equals you get things done. So because I've been able to see that through myself, that's what keeps me motivated.
You know, it's funny you talk about your mother, because my mother was exactly the same way. She would tell me every day, you could do anything you want. And while I realized the world is what it is, I couldn't do everything necessarily well. it gets to you emotionally after a while when you're getting that encouragement every day, particularly from my mother in particular. She was a very optimistic woman, and I was the oldest of 4.
Okay.
And she was an EMT, an emergency medical technician, and the ambulance person in the United States. And she loved helping people, and she was very positive about everything. Yeah. To the point where sometimes I pull my hair out. She was so positive. But I know what you're talking about when you talk about that. I'll be back in a moment with more of Superhero Leadership. Stay with us.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks, or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Visit USAA.com/bundle.
Bundle savings are off total premium, not available in all states or in all situations. To qualify, auto policy must be active prior to property policy issue, subject to change. Restrictions apply. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
I want to talk a little bit, if we can, about classic mentoring for a minute. As I mentioned, I was very blessed to have 4 or 5 great mentors, either people I worked for or people who I just knew either socially or from business, but not necessarily working directly with. I'm very obviously pro mentoring, and I've tried to return that to other young people in my life and still do a lot of that, actually. But what I've noticed recently about young people is they don't really totally even understand what I'll call classic mentoring, which is a relationship between 2 people based on trust and knowing and lack of judgment and what have you. I saw your TED Talk, which I recommend to everybody, by the way. And, I recommend your book.
Thank you very much.
Everybody, to everybody as well. I have to say that I saw that I was remiss. I wasn't doing enough thinking about why young people are what they are and how things have changed so much. Can you talk to us about, you are the guru of reverse mentoring. What does that mean to you? And what are the trends that you're seeing, or where do you recommend that our effective leaders of today utilize?
So whilst I am the guru and the world leading expert on reverse mentoring, I must hold my hand up and say that it was actually Jack Welch at GE General Electric, in the 1990s that employed reverse mentoring, first of all. And it was really to help his senior executives to understand the digital age that was coming along. And it has been used throughout the years. But if I can just maybe go back to my experience with reverse mentoring and how I ended up, if that's okay.
Sure.
I was at Virgin Atlantic, and at Virgin Atlantic, I was involved in lots of activities outside of my day job. So my job there eventually was commercial strategy director. But throughout, Virgin is the kind of company where you see a challenge, you see a problem, and you're invited to be part of the solution. And that's definitely, my Patrice will fix it hat. And so one of the things that I finally did was I was asked to be the reverse mentor for our CEO. And our CEO was very brave. And he said, look, I don't have any Black women in my work circle and in my inner circle. And I really want to understand your viewpoints and opinion as to what we can do to be more inclusive. And alluding to your question that you asked me, what was it about me that allowed me to transcend the different levels in the way that I've transcended it, which is atypical to someone who looks like me generally. And for me, he was curious, should I say? And he was also very vulnerable. And for me, that opened up and unlocked a great thing for me, which was the first time I felt seen and heard and welcomed as a Black female, even though I had presented to him as a senior leader many times. It was the first time I didn't feel like I needed to assimilate. And so that was really important for me. So that really anchored me and made me think, oh, wow, this reverse mentoring, this feels different to everything else that I've been on leadership programs and been part of so many different things. And then I started to dig a bit deeper. And this part of the stories is important because there are lots of different interventions. But this one just, let's say, in colloquial terms, it hits different. And the reason it does is because senior leaders can be sponsors of programs. They can kind of sign the budget off and they can be involved in it and be reported to. But reverse mentoring is the only intervention where the senior leader has to put themselves in that vulnerable position. So they can't delegate it. And so for me, reverse mentoring as a definition is where we have senior leaders who are mentored by people who are underrepresented around the senior leadership team table. And that is across any of the protected characteristics. But the thing that I'm really honing in on at the moment, which is the biggest conversations that we're having, which is around intergenerational leadership and what the workplace looks like. And I call it intergenerational intelligence. And then the second thing that everyone's having a conversation is artificial intelligence and how that's impacting. But those are the two conversations I'm having repeatedly. And reverse mentoring allows senior leaders to step out of their usual comfort zone and really tap into the fact that we have actually 5 generations in the workforce and 6 if you use Generation AI. And therefore, it's important to understand how do we amalgamate, how do we generate value from all of these different generations? And it is through intergenerational intelligence, but we can't do that if we lead the way that we've always led. Very long-winded answer, but I think the context is really important when it comes to breaking out the definition.
One of the questions I would have in thinking about this is just, you obviously need the younger generations to open up, in this case, for this to be effective. And of course, they have to trust that you're a good listener and want the information.
Absolutely.
But I suspect it's still hard with some people to get them to open up. One of the things that I talk about quite a bit is communications and the lack of good communications among many leaders who don't fully appreciate communicating. And I would often, in my career, have set up situations where I would meet with multi-generations, just talk about what's happening with the organization, answer any questions they might have. And I mentioned what I call pizza lunches in the past, where I would often have a pizza lunch with 10 people in the room, all from different functions, all from different levels of the company. And when these first started, I would, ask for questions and no one knew me. It was the new turnaround guy coming through the door. And so no one would ask a question. And I understood that they don't really know me and you don't want to put yourself out there. Maybe you ask a tough question and the new leader takes it out on you or something. So that's a natural fear. And so I would actually ask myself questions. Initially, I'd say, well, if I was you, I'd want to know if we're going to have layoffs or not. And I would answer the question. And so on. And then after a number of these, 3 or 4 of these events, slowly few questions started coming. And then months later, people would ask anything. And of course, I was using that as a way to communicate with a very large organization, multinational, because this minute lunch was over. They were on the phone. Do you know what Peter said?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, around the world.
Yeah.
And so they were disciples in a way. But that wasn't really reverse mentoring. I thought it was very effective, and I think it was as far as it went. But now my mind is opening up a little bit more. But how would I encourage younger people to talk to me honestly about their feelings? How do you, that's the part I'm having trouble getting to.
So I think what you just described was you came into organizations, you opened it up by first saying, if I was in your position, I would be asking X, Y, and Z. And then slowly they built trust in you and they became much more comfortable in asking the question. And for me, it comes down to psychological safety. So I know this term is bandied around quite frequently. In my viewpoint, it's around allowing people to understand that they can share their viewpoints and opinions without kind of repercussions. People come in and be like, yeah, it's psychologically safe, you can share with me. But if you haven't built up that trust, if you haven't built up that exchange, that emotional exchange, and if you haven't been vulnerable, people are not going to just open up to you straight away. And so a key part of my work is understanding the foundation that we're going into in an organization. If it is an organization that's pretty toxic, then the likelihood is people aren't going to be very open. And when I say toxic, I mean there's a lot of politics within the organization and people are fearful of their role because things may get taken out of context and information is used as a weapon against each other. Okay. And we know information is power.
Yes.
And where we have certain leaders or certain cultures which perpetuate the use of that information in a negative way, you're not going to have a very successful program and you're not going to have people opening up to share because they're in fear of their jobs, their roles, and, their well-being overall if they're in that environment. So the work that I do really starts off with the people. It looks at the engagement surveys, if we have those.
Mm-hmm.
It looks at the temperature of the organization to see where is there a challenge and where could reverse mentoring provide the best solution. And we can look at it by leaders. So, there's some great surveys where you can cut it in so many different ways. We can cut it by demographics. We can cut it by tenure in terms of how long people have been in the organization, but really being clear about what is the challenge that you're trying to solve. So if we're looking at intergenerational intelligence, for example, it could be that there's a really high attrition rate.
Yes.
So we're hiring people, that's great. We're getting them through the door. We've got diversity in applications and new people starting. But then there's a problem within 6 months to a year, we're having a really big drop off with individuals joining our organization of a certain age. And we haven't got the intelligence behind why that is.
Right.
Or there might be murmurings, but there's not necessarily a clear answer. And so in a lot of organizations, I get brought in to look at that piece. And we use reverse mentoring to understand almost the depth of some of the challenges. Because what we have is surveys, we have exit surveys, we've got a rumor mill. But you, chairman, you won't really know that, because by the time you get to the report, it's so sanitized that you don't actually understand the truth that's behind it. Yep. And something that's so simple for you to be able to instruct or fix, you won't even understand the root of it because you won't have the truth. So by you having a reverse mentoring relationship with, say, a group of individuals. So I do mentoring one-to-one and also in circles. So reverse mentoring circles or mentoring circles where people might not feel as safe one-on-one, but actually as a collective, they can also drive the solutions as well. So you can bring them on board. You can have that conversation. You can say, this is generally what I'm feeling. Tell me, give me that context so you can bounce around and they can feel like they're also not alone.
Okay.
A lot of the trends, you asked me about the trends and what people are seeing. So we're seeing like a very high attrition rate amongst new joiners coming into organizations.
Okay.
They are not sticking around to waiting for it to get better. They speak very frequently. We've got things like Glassdoor. We've got LinkedIn. We've got lots of different ways that people can temperature check an organization. And if it's not living up to their expectations, they are very vocal and then they will move on.
Yeah.
So if they do not hear or have any signs of anything moving, they don't necessarily have the patience that I had, for examples, to work through things. And I think this is where organizations have to be true to their word. So if they want to have a multi-generation workforce that they can see and they want to drive value from, they have to listen to each of the generations within the workforce.
We'll continue our conversation with Patrice Gordon right after this short break.
This episode is brought to you by the world's first reposado from Tequila Herradura. Made with slow-cooked, hand-harvested agave sealed into oak barrels and aged 11 months. Before being enjoyed in your glass. Experience the world's first reposado, Tequila Herradura. Please drink responsibly. Responsibility.org. Tequila Herradura. 40% alcohol by volume. Imported by Brown-Forman, Louisville, Kentucky. Herradura is a registered trademark. Copyright 2025 Brown-Forman Corporation.
Patrice, you want to talk a minute or two about your book?
I would love to talk about my book. So this book was born in the pandemic where I had lots of time on my hands because the planes weren't flying. And I did lots of research firsthand and desktop around what were the key proponents that made reverse mentoring programs work or not. So if you Google reverse mentoring, you'll see lots of programs starting up, but not necessarily the outcomes. And I've got a bias for action and a bias for outcomes, finance and commercial. It's not just the talk. It's like, what do you do? And then so what? And so within this book, you've got some context setting, but most importantly, you've got the different steps that you need to take to make sure that you can run a successful reverse mentoring program. My intention with it was that after reviewing all of the evidence, it was very clear that there was some very avoidable failures from some of these programs. And so after reading this book, after watching the TED Talk, there is no reason why organizations should implement a reverse mentoring program that's not psychologically safe and that doesn't have the parameters around it to set it up for success. And for me, I think that is key. So don't just start it on the side of your desk and feel like you can, push it through with, no, you need to be very intentional about it. And two things that are important to me, which is the psychological safety of the mentors And this is the underrepresented individuals. And the second thing is around, that organizational engagement. We don't want to do it any more damage. So it's important that you set it up correctly from the start. And so we've got some great stories in there, which are obviously anonymized. But the key is to read this to give yourself some context before you embark on a reverse mentoring program, because you are asking for discretionary effort from both your mentors and your mentees. And you want to make sure that you're setting up for success.
Before we started the show, you mentioned that you had found a couple of things in our 32 essentials of leadership. For our audience, if you're not familiar, we do have what we call the 32 essentials for superhero leadership. And this is a list of, call it behaviors, attitudes, influences, disciplines, and so on that I think are important for leaders to do turnarounds. I've managed to get 7 turnarounds done in my career. And every turnaround I learned something new. And this is a list I made up of what I thought I'd learned. And some of them relate to what we're talking about. Not exactly on point, but they're around the periphery. Do you want to mention a couple of those?
I've went through them and I was like, okay, how can these be applicable? So it's number 6, which is don't be imperialist or self-important, be accessible. So really key for the next generation is access to power. So being able to have a conversation with people of importance and seeing your leaders as human, right? And not having necessarily that strict hierarchy where you can't have access to that power, because when it comes down to it, we are all just human. Number 8, never think I've seen it all before. So we are in this environment. What I think is really interesting now is for us who have been in the workplace for a while, we anchor back to how it was because our future is unknown. So how the future is going to play out and the timings of that is very unknown. So we naturally anchor backwards. But for this generation entering the workforce, they don't have that anchor to go back to. So they are living in the land of possibility. And when you live in a land of possibility, when you have a leader that says, I've seen it all before, you really haven't, because you have no idea what's coming.
Yes, so I agree with you, because the sociology of working is so different than it was even 10 or 15 years ago. And I do recognize that, but I also recognize I'm kind of out of it. So what else do you have?
Find a few people who will tell you the truth even when it hurts. And so we know that as we get more senior, less people like to tell us the truth because we want people to agree with us because we want to get things done. But I think this one's really important because we can't grow. And I always say it's better for you to throw rocks inside the house than outside of the house. So it's better for us to have it out within our organization, within our teams, and we can have that healthy conflict and that healthy conversation, as opposed to our competitor or people outside then giving us a challenge. So therefore, having people who tell us the truth, even when it hurts, we should be psychologically safe to be able to have that conversation within our organization. Eliminate layers of management. Again, reverse mentoring just cuts through that. It allows you to get to the point even quicker without you having to have 3 months worth of rounds of meetings to get to the crux of the issue. Welcome problems. Worry about what you don't know, I think is important, because again, when we have information that's filtered up to us, something that's really key and important to individuals on the shop floor or people coming into the organization, we won't know about it until it becomes a big issue. So, little problems become big problems if they're not done.
And I often say, again, coming through the door, and of course, nobody believes me. First, I have to prove it over time with my behavior. But I often say what I really worry about at night is problems I don't know about. Because I think we can solve 95% of the problems if I know about them.
Absolutely.
So I would say to the the organization, bring me your problems. Now, many people are thinking, that sounds nice, but do I dare? And of course, if you've got a problem every week, that's a whole different issue. Okay. After a couple of people have the courage to do that and it works out, and they see, I was not blaming them for having problems, that, everyone has problems.
Yeah.
And so it becomes much easier then. It becomes part of the culture of the company. But it takes time.
Absolutely.
Because leaders have to prove they're not just BSing. With the only way they can prove it is with their own actions.
Absolutely. And I think just following on from, I've got one more, but following on from what you said, coming with problems and individuals and our employees really looking at it from a customer lens is the important. So customer and employee. So if your employees aren't happy because of something internal, which is could make their well-being better because of an organizational structure piece, that like a policy or something that you could change. I think that is important. Where I see it really work well is where employees feel empowered to bring problem. They said, this is a customer problem. And the reason it's a customer problem is X, Y, and Z. If we continue to ignore this, this is going to become a bigger problem. And I can see it coming. And the frustration I feel from lots of people who are really working close with the customers, they have the customer frustration on a day-to-day. Those of us who are sat in the office from senior levels don't necessarily see and get that customer frustration, but we have the power to change it. And so our employees coming to us with those problems and saying like, this is how the policy or this is how it's manifesting, this is the change that we can make to make it less of a problem and a challenge for our customers. I think that's the unique part, because actually that's what you want to hear as a leader. You want to hear what your customer pain points are. Because when we're looking at investments, when we're looking at, prioritization and our risks, those are the things that we need to loop in. And sometimes we miss that when it's filtered so much. Mm-hmm. And the last one, which is number 32, is know when to leave. And I think that is really important. When we look at society and when we look at businesses today, the biggest challenge is that succession plan, right? And looking at individuals who stay in roles for longer than they should because they really enjoy it and they're not leaving space for other people. So one of the biggest challenges I hear from the next generation is dead man shoes, which is like, literally, I'm not going to hang around here because I can't see where my promotion is coming because that person is not moving. And if that person doesn't move, it's a knock-on effect. So those are the ones that I thought really touched on the essence of reverse mentoring and we could use reverse mentoring to help to kind of unlock.
The 32 you mentioned, the know when to leave, came from me because I have become addicted to turnaround situations. And typically to turn around a multinational organization takes 3 years because you're dealing with lots of subcultures and you've got to reset the culture broadly in light of local cultures as well, which you want to, keep, of course. And so it takes time to really have it sink in. But once I felt that the organization could move on beautifully if I was run over by a truck tomorrow, the organization was ready for the future. It was time for me to go. And what changed for me with each one was I went into a different industry. So 7 turnarounds and 4, 5 different industries among those turnarounds. And then as a chairman, I've been in more different industries, which I actually enjoy. But that was written at the time for someone at a more senior level, know when to leave. But I see your point completely about someone who's more junior. But you also have the option to try to change things too.
You do.
Rather than just go out the door. And the feedback I get from a lot of C-suite executives now is most people don't do that. They're walking out the door. My question for you is just, how do you organize? You can do surveys, you can do all these things, but in the end, it sounds like you have to get face-to-face. A large organization with thousands of employees, you're not going to be face-to-face with everyone, but there are ways to communicate still with everyone. How would you tell me? I'm getting free coaching here, by the way, in case the audience doesn't know it. I'm getting thousands of dollars worth of free coaching, but how do you organize actually? How do you provide those experiences, those face-to-face experiences that I think you need for this?
I would say we tackle, the challenges. So let's use intergenerational intelligence. What we would do in that situation is we would get the latest recruits, we'd bring them together. So I think in this, when we're talking about this group of individuals, it's probably really much more effective to do it in a group setting. So it might not be one-to-one. If there's something that piques your interest in that conversation, you can have a side conversation with them. But I would say bring them together and say, collectively, this is our challenge. And I'm very aware. I think it's important to acknowledge the past. Where I see things fall over is where we have new leaders come in and they say, right, we're going to do this now. This is my forte. This is my area. And this is how it's going to work going forwards, without acknowledging perhaps what had happened in the past. So it's important to acknowledge and recognize, we had this program before, we tried this before, it didn't work, and we've learned from it, and this is what we're going to do differently going forwards. That is a critical point, because otherwise people think, oh, here we go again. Here's another initiative. So to acknowledge that part, I think, is important. but also acknowledge that actually as a leader, as a team, we haven't really got this, we haven't got it sorted, and we need your help to be part of the solution. Where I've seen organizations really do a great job of this is where they have acknowledged that and they have said, actually, we recognize we want to be the best and we want to be better, but we need your help and support in order to do that. And we're prepared to do that now. You touched on communication, and that is the number one thing that comes up in all of the reverse mentoring programs. Every single one, regardless of what the intention of the program is, it's around communication. It's around leaders thinking they communicate frequently and clearly, and people, everyone else say no, they don't, especially where we are in this hybrid space, right? It's not as though we have meetings all in person all the time. We're in a space now where leaders have to learn how to communicate differently. And so when we're in a position to do that, and you demonstrate that courage and that vulnerability that we touched on, to say we don't have all the answers, but we want to work with you to get to the right solution for our organization. You having the power and you saying that means a lot, because where a lot of things are getting lost in translation is middle management, where they are either, they have enough fires that they're putting out at present. If you look at the latest management Gallup, McKinsey reports, you'll see that kind of 70% of your mental health and well-being is led by your manager, but also that those individuals feel quite stressed by their manager because of inconsistent messaging and not enough support. So we've got a problem there.
And the ultimate success of reverse mentoring has to really center around middle management.
It does.
Because they're the ones dealing mostly with lower level people, new people, younger people. And they have to buy in to the concept as well. And they have to make those personal leaps, if you will, to be more human and what have you. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter what the senior people are doing. They're helpful. But as a chairman, I'm really not interested in taking the lead on this with my companies. It's really up to the CEOs.
Absolutely.
And I wouldn't want to usurp them anyway. And I'm not suggesting CEOs that I work with would be resistant. Not at all. In fact, I think the opposite.
Okay. I look forward to the call then.
So I see where you're coming from on this, but the lower levels really are what matters. We've got more leadership lessons from Patrice after this break.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love, starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
You worked with Richard Branson. I'm suspecting he was very receptive to these concepts. Is that true?
Yes. So the CEO was someone called Craig Krieger. But when Richard found out about the work that I did, alongside some of the other inclusion activities, he was very impressed. And he did a big shout out on LinkedIn to say that actually this is how you lead. You come up with an idea, you see a problem, and you get on with it. Virgin Atlantic and the Virgin brand is a challenger brand. It's about getting things done. It's about cutting through things and being almost a maverick. And so that's actually what led to the TED Talk and what led to the book, because it was kind of Richard's support of the work that I'd done and the impact that it had on the organization.
Again, I only know him through the media, of course, but he's certainly been very different type of executive and very successful being that way in many different industries. Some of which don't relate at all to each other. And so, he's somebody who's, I think, a good model for many up and coming leaders and people who aspire to leadership.
Absolutely.
To think about and
very accessible, I would say.
Yes.
The first, your one around, accessibility and not being, arrogant or self-important. So Richard Branson definitely doesn't have that. And even, when we look at our airline, so Virgin Atlantic, the crew, he's got a great relationship with the crew and they feel very confident in sharing their viewpoints and opinions of new routes when things change, et cetera, et cetera. And he takes the time to respond to those queries and those messages. And I think that's a really important thing. But that's his business and his brand.
Right.
So if we can have leaders kind of feel that almost it's ours, I think that's a really important part of why he's so successful.
I wrote that particular essential, don't be impervious or an imperialist, so to speak, is because when I first came into the business world, and I'm a Vietnam veteran.
Okay.
So this was after I did 2 tours in the war.
Okay.
And it's very interesting because you could trace this sense of leadership, at least in American business, when I first came into the business world, back to World War II. Many companies were still functionally oriented. There's no such thing as a matrix approach. And the leadership every meeting was in their office. You had to come to see them.
Be summoned.
You summoned, exactly right. And it was a very different world then. One of my other essentials is admit your mistakes. And I learned that in the Navy from a number of officers. One in particular had a very interesting experience, which I won't go into now, but where the captain of my ship, in the interest of safety of the whole ship, admitted he had made a big mistake in a certain situation and worked very hard to make sure it never happened again. I still remember that to this day. I remember it's a long time ago. I remember every word he said afterwards when he was reviewing the screw up, which also turned out to be disastrous, but luckily didn't.
When we admit our mistakes, we admit that we're not perfect. And we put our ego aside and our pride aside and we say, actually, do you know what? I messed up here. And that is being vulnerable. When we're looking at leaders, we want to follow leaders, right? There's something, we follow rules most of the time, but we don't necessarily just follow rules. We follow people, we follow humans, we follow leaders. And when someone shares their more human side and their vulnerable side, we want to follow them even more. We trust them even more. They're taking off their armor and they're saying, actually, I am an imperfect human and I made a mistake and I'm okay with admitting that. I want you to know that. And that gives you permission also that if you make a mistake, that I might be a bit more compassionate with you because I've led by example. And so I think that's the essence, where we're talking about learning, when we're talking about reverse mentoring, we're saying we don't have all the answers. And evidently from my attrition, from the fact that I'm struggling to recruit, from my results, from the fact that we're not innovative, there's a problem there. And I'm open to being corrected and I'm open to seeing things in an alternative viewpoint. And I really want you to be part of that solution. For me, when you talk about the Navy and we talk about the Army, like we've got rules that we need to follow. And unlike civilian life, you have to follow those rules.
True.
Right. And insubordination will get you arrested.
True.
In business, that's not the case, but actually insubordination, when you are following a leader or you're having to follow the rules of a leader that you don't believe in, the cost for that is not being arrested. The cost for that for the business is lack of innovation, is the business not moving forward, is things happening and you have no idea why it's happening because people don't feel like they have permission to share. And they also feel like when they do share, they're not listened to anyway. I think there's so many parallels with that, but insubordination costs you a lot more from a financial perspective in the business world. And we don't necessarily know about it if we don't have safe cultures where people feel safe to speak.
Patrice, we've talked a lot about people of all ages in this situation, but now I'm going to play the role of someone who's 24 years old, who's got a good education, maybe even a graduate degree, maybe not, but is aspiring to be a leader, or at least is thinking about being a leader. Most human beings do not want to be leaders because of the responsibility and the risk that comes with making other people unhappy because you're going to as a leader. It's impossible to avoid. But so I'm 24 and, I'm Patrice, I'm wondering about where I am. Been in this job for 2 years and it's okay. But you think I should make a move now or maybe I should go and should I confront my boss or what would you say? What would you say to someone like me?
So assuming that progression and management is something that you want to do, because there is a group across all the generations actually, who are like, actually, I don't want to be a manager, just like you said. So assuming that person wants to be a leader, I would invite them to develop context. And the biggest gap that I see is the context part. So we talked about being anchoring to the past, and that being almost the only thing that we know, but slightly problematic because we don't know what the future will be. But I feel like we have a great opportunity right now to step into that possibility to say, actually, the constraints of the past no longer exist. And I'm 24, I want to advance, and this is where I see the future being. So not just, tell me how I'm going to be able to advance. We have to take ownership of our careers. I run a session for organizations called Be the CEO of Your Own Career. Not revolutionary, but it's very important because your manager will not know necessarily what your goals and aspirations are. So he might think that you're happy doing what you're doing, working 9 to 5 and having a great social life and having a life outside work, because we know that work is not everything now. Like, people have got things outside of their 9 to 5 that they want to explore, and they want to live a full life. It's not just work anymore. And so you being able to articulate, this is where I have an interest. This is where I think I would like to be in a few years' time. Can I have your guidance and advice in terms of what that would look like? This is what I think it looks like, but I'd like your advice and guidance on that. And I don't think that has changed throughout the number of generations that are. I don't think that advice has changed in regards to what you need to do to own your career, to step forward. I think the opportunity that individuals have now is that it doesn't necessarily have to be as linear, it doesn't have to be the way that we did it before. There is a lot of talk and a lot of acceptance now about range. So not just specializing on just one thing, but being more of a generalist and moving across to make sure that you have like different toolkits that you can pull from. And we know that in the advent of Gen AI and what we're going to be faced going forwards, it's those individuals who are able to be a bridge and join the dots that are going to be the most successful. Because we can't live in our, you mentioned matrix management before. We can't live in our silos that we previously lived in. That person that's able to say, actually, I've got an experience in finance, I've got some in commercial, a bit of operations. I understand the full picture a little bit more. And that means that I can be a more effective manager. That's what your skill set needs to focus on. I think there's obviously lots of industries specific, but industries will still exist. They'll just exist in a different way or form. So I think taking ownership, being clear as to what you enjoy and what you think that you can provide value to, I think is important. So I have interns, and it's all very interesting, but I'm like, you are hot off the press. Like, you are in school, you have like the latest thoughts on what I should be doing. So I'm open to that. Like, I have a whole range of things that I need to get done, but I'll explain that to you, but I want you to tell me where you feel like you can add value. Because I won't know what that is. And organizations don't necessarily know what that is either. So we need to allow that next generation to say, actually, this is where I think I can provide the most value. And I've actually got examples of individuals who have proposed something and CEOs have created a role for them and they've driven that value because the CEO was open-minded enough to say, actually, I can see the opportunity and the potential there. But the individual had to provide the context and give them, this is what you're missing out on,
So I'm going to play the 24-year-old for a minute and throw you a curve here a little bit. I was recently talking to a senior executive and told me a story about one of the younger employees who was hired to do a certain position and was able to do highly competent in 2 hours a day, but was effectively hired for 8 hours a day and was very upset when they were told, well, if you're only using 2 hours a day, we need to find more for you to do for the other 6 hours. There was really a disconnect. The individual thought that they were hired to get a certain context, certain job done. The senior person, it was about you're hired to work 8 hours. Probably they're both right in a funny way.
I think they are.
But there was a disconnect. What advice would you give?
Oh, see, that's really difficult, isn't it?
I know. I'm sorry. I apologize.
This is the reality of the world that we live in. Yeah. Because I can say when this goes from competence to incompetence. Not if we have a workforce that is not trained for the skills that we need for the future, they become incompetent. So not that you're not worthy, but that you're not fit for future. Then you have someone who's completely competent and is able to. Is a bit unfair because they have they have actually invested in a skill set and worked to hone their craft so well that they can do what that person does in 8 hours in 2 hours. And so I don't think they should be penalized for that.
Right.
I obviously am saying this from a point of view where that was also me, right? Whereas I took a step back when I joined Virgin Atlantic. I was a finance director. I took a step back to be head of commercial finance. And then I did exactly what I just recommended, which is a lateral move as a generalist into the commercial space. But because I was so experienced, I was able to do my job very effectively. And so what I did was I got involved in all the inclusion activities. And so let's say that wasn't very popular because other people were working really, really hard to get what they needed to get done and had in a lot more hours than I was doing it. But I was hired and I took a step back. So I was able to do that. So I think when you're hiring, there's two things. One, you're hiring for attitude. You're hiring for the fact that that individual wants to not maybe just a job, but they want to contribute towards the organization in its best way, shape or form. And then I think it is important for you to recognize like high performance as well. Because I would be like, are you interested in doing some more? Like, what is your career goal and what is it that you want to achieve? Because actually, if you've done that so easily, the likelihood is that they're very intelligent and they will get bored very quickly.
Yes.
And so we have to figure out actually how do we keep them?
So the lesson is look beyond the current job.
Yeah.
You know, for something that will occupy them longer but also help them grow. It could be a lateral move.
Yeah.
In your case, you actually went back a step.
Yeah, I did.
Which most people might not want to do. You're very unique, I think.
Because I did my coaching qualification at the same time.
Okay.
So for me, it was a very specific move. I wanted to get back into travel because I missed it. And I also trained as an exec coach. So for me, I was also very clear when I joined Virgin that I had this business as well. Right. So I knew that my capacity, I needed to focus some of my capacity on the business. And I was very transparent when I joined and not many organizations would be accepting of that, you know, you have this business on the side and you're doing that. But I started the trend.
But if part of the culture of the company was to move laterally fairly regularly, a lot of people, you know, again, building, if you will, their competence, their resume, their whatever, and that's what you do in the company. That's not a bad thing.
Absolutely.
At all.
Absolutely.
And that may be a solution for a lot of people's concerns. And eventually, yes, you're going to get that forward move or whatever if you're good and what have you. Listen, this has been terrific. I'm really happy for the audience. I just really met Patrice face to face, you know, right before we started this session. And it's been great. You know, I may have to call you, Patrice, on certain situations. I have a situation with my wife, actually, that might apply to reverse mentoring.
Okay. All right.
Although she's been practicing that, actually, for
on you.
a very long time. You remember that thing about find people who will tell you, you know, what you're doing wrong, even when it hurts? Yeah, well, I got that a long time ago, actually, at least.
In a safe space, though, right?
Yes, absolutely. No one else knew. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And best of luck.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's it for this episode of Superhero Leadership. I want to thank Patrice Gordon for sharing her life's journey and invaluable leadership insights with us. If you want to learn more about Patrice's work, I highly recommend her book, Reverse Mentoring, and her TED Talk. Both are transformational. I hope you'll join me again next time. Until then, keep leading like a superhero with purpose, passion, and integrity. I'm Peter Cuneo.